maul in the Central Committee. Let's cringe in the Central Committee. Let's bog in the Central Committee right now.
All right, chat. Let's start transitioning into the Hasan interview of Robert Reich, talking about a problem that we have in America called collective amnesia. We're going to have Hasan interviewing Robert Reich. All right?
At the risk of being the skunk at the picnic, I feel compelled to warn you that if we forget and move on from the tragedies of this past year, we are setting ourselves on a dangerous path. Of course, I understand the desire to forget all the unpleasantness and start a new chapter. But if we do,
Hasan Abi or Mehdi Hasan? What do you think?
Future. Let me remind you, Donald Trump lied about the results of the last election.
Frankly, we did win this election.
And then, you remember, don't you? He tried to overturn the results.
If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us.
Trump twisted the arms of state election officials. He held a rally to stop Congress from certifying the election, followed by the violent attack on the Capitol. 5 people died. Senators and representatives could have been slaughtered. Several Republican members of Congress encouraged the attempted coup by joining him in the big lie and refusing to certify the election, even after the mob desecrated the halls of our democracy. This was in January of this year. Yet we seem to be doing everything we possibly can to blot it out of our memory. Meanwhile, those responsible for instigating the attack have not been held accountable in any respect, including by the media. The Washington Post hosted a live video chat with Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley, a ringleader in the attempt to overturn the results of the election. Hawley had even made a fist pump gesture toward the mob at the Capitol before the attack. But the Post billed the interview as being about Hawley's new book on big tech. It even posted a biography of Hawley that made no mention of Hawley's sedition, referring instead to his supposed reputation, quote, for taking on the big and the powerful to protect Missouri.
Chat. Our mainstream media is going to usher in fascism so completely and so obviously it's not even real.
Workers.
They're talking
and
about
as
January
a, quote,
6th.
Fierce defender of the Constitution.
I'm going to say one thing. I've seen a lot of lefties basically kind of stop talking about January 6th or kind of treat January 6th like it's Russiagate or something. And I think that is legitimately one of the most stupid and dangerous takes. There's this kind of like world, they put on this aura of world weariness where they're like, this is just like Russiagate. There's nothing to it. Oh, it's just the libs. They're just pretending like, these people are a threat, but they're just hover around guys. Oh, who cares? Blah, 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 blah. And kind of pretending like the fascists and the Proud Boys and the 3%ers and the rioters who walked around the Capitol weren't actually a threat. And you're right. The odds that they actually would have overturned the government on that day is low. Sort of like when Hitler did the beer hall putsch. When he did that march, the odds that he was going to overturn the German government were low. All right? But it's not just the odds of that specific event happening. It's what it says about where our politics are going. And the way we react to that assault on our democracy shows us how we would react to further assaults. And right now, the answer is the Republican Party is covering it the fuck up. The Republican Party will not even investigate that Capitol Police were waving in some of these rioters, that Donald Trump was calling on his supporters to go down and give the Congress people backbone. Yes, we avoided the worst possible calamity. Yes, we avoided politicians being assassinated. But if you think that this is just some sort of blip and not a sign of something far more important going on, which is a commitment to anti-democracy among Republicans, you're missing the fucking point. Is it only start to get real if Bernie gets killed? Is it only real if a politician that's on the left is killed? What makes it real? At what point is it serious enough for you to treat seriously? It's absolutely the darkest timeline. January 6th was a failure and Chauvin got convicted. Yeah, I mean, that's not the darkest timeline, but we're certainly on a dark timeline. The far scarier thing about the cops let it happen and the Republicans are ignoring it. And yes, it's a scary message. Hey, Mike. Had a bit of a moral dilemma. I had a 10-year friendship going on with a group of folks who are complete opposite end of the political spectrum. These people have treated me decently and they tell me they care about me personally, but our political arguments get really intense to the point where I feel alienated. But they are my only close friends left and I'm scared of being alone. Do you have any advice? I think that in interpersonal relationships, it is important to recognize that you are not going to change people's minds overnight and to understand the context of people's belief systems. People's belief systems are not constructed from rational debates they have over a beer. It's a longer process of persuasion. And for me, just because someone is a conservative doesn't mean they're necessarily beyond the pale for me to be a friend with, although it's pretty unlikely, or to engage with as a family member. But I will not ever concede my values or allow something bigoted to take place in front of me. So my suggestion is if you have a family member or a friend or a partner who is more conservative than you, that you should begin building webs of empathy. This is why pride is such an important thing to pivot from. The reason why pride was so successful and the coming out theory of change was so successful is because for the longest time, gay people under an assimilationist theory hid their sexuality and tried to be productive members of society. And only after they get close friends with someone would they admit their attraction, their same-sex lifestyle to people. And what we found is that did not result in change. People didn't go, oh, did you learn that the local accountant is gay? He's been such an upstanding member of society. Maybe the gays aren't so bad after all. That's not how it was. What the assimilation closeted thing did is, did you hear so-and-so is gay? He's a bad person who's been hiding it the whole time. I knew there was something wrong with him. And when people pivoted to being bold and out and started to draw, and what did that do? It created tension, yes, within families and friendships, but it also created a web of empathy where people were like, my son is gay, my brother is gay. And a lot of people started realizing how important gay liberation was to the people that they cared about. And they started to shift. So if you have a family member or a friend who disagrees with you about something, it's not necessarily time for a civil war. Now, let me say there's one exception. If they are actively engaged in oppression themselves, that's a different story. Then I would probably not be involved with that person. But if they just have dumbass opinions, everybody's got dumbass opinions. And the thing to do if you care about people and you care about the causes is to keep that conversation going and building that web of empathy and changing people's experiences. And the other best thing you can do is start to get them to block dumbass propaganda that gets pumped into their heads. Stop watching Fox News. Stop watching OAN. Stop. Deactivate your Facebook. Those are the type of brain stimulations that can make a conservative identity hard to pierce. In my understanding, that isn't the view of guys like Chapo. It's that we're actually powerless to stop all this. What are you going to do about it, Mike, besides rant about how it's like Germany before World War II? We're alienated and powerless, Mike. If a fascist takeover is going to happen, there isn't enough of the left to stop it. Well, the project is to build the left. The project of our project is to build the left and give people confidence in their positions, and to organize like-minded people in opposition to what I see as a growing fascist threat. If the fascist coup happens today, yes, I don't have anyone to call on to fight them in the streets. I'd hope something spontaneously happens, which is not great. But it's my project, and the project I hope of people like Chapo, to build a more disciplined left that is, and build the recognition of the growing threats that occur. I don't think it's beyond the pale at this point, but I do think there is a dangerous growing strain in American politics today. A lot of this can be avoided with the passing of the For the People Act. I don't know that it'll be completely avoided, but it'll certainly provide a lot more stable of a situation for our democracy to function and prevent the fascist takeover of the government through legalistic means. Doesn't mean that we're going to be perfectly safe, but it certainly will protect us from the takeover of our government through purely legalistic interpretations of the Electoral College or gerrymandered districts.
CBS this morning interviewed Florida Republican
back to
Rick
the video.
Scott, another senator who tried to overturn the election by not certifying the results. But there was no mention of his sedition either. So the CBS interviewer confined his questions to Biden's spending plans.
As we heard, President Biden has proposed a $2.3 trillion infrastructure plan,
which Scott, not surprisingly, opposed. The media is supposed to serve as a crucial check on those in power, but in its breathless desire to cover the news, it's failing to remind us of our recent past. The consequences of this failure are dire. Trump's big lie that the 2020 election was stolen and that President Biden is not legitimate is not disappearing. A majority of Republican voters believe him. That big lie is being used by Republican state legislatures to justify an all-out assault on the right to vote. Hours after Florida enacted new voting restrictions, Texas's Republican-led legislature pushed ahead with its own bill that would make it one of the hardest states in which to cast a ballot. The Republican-controlled Arizona Senate launched a private recount of the 2020 presidential election results in Maricopa County, farming out 2.1 million ballots to GOP partisans with no experience in ballot counting or election monitoring. At least one person involved in the recount actually participated in the Capitol attack. The Republican Party even purged one of its own leaders, Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney, for telling the truth about the election. Meanwhile, Republican state legislatures are muscling their way into election administration as they attempt to dislodge or bully local election officials who have always run our voting systems. Trump's big lie will continue to flourish unless the lawmakers who went along with it and have failed to renounce it face real consequences. That means a thorough, independent 9/11 type inquiry into what happened, whether members of Congress were involved, how Donald Trump and others were involved. Republican leaders must not duck this. They must be held accountable to the truth.
And by the way, chat, they are ducking it, and they won't.
Otherwise, the trauma of 2020 will return, perhaps in even more terrifying form.
And I think Robert Reich is absolutely right. It's time for Hasan. I need Hasan to interview Hasan. That's my that is my dream. That is my dream debate title.
Joe Biden signed the $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package, bringing what the president called, quote, desperately needed.
Have you read No Shortcuts?
To individuals, schools, childcare centers, businesses, as well as local and state governments hit hard.
Is that by Jane McAlevey?
By the pandemic. But ask Republicans, and the essence of the legislation signed by President Biden is that millions of Americans who could now be working, who should now be working, are not. They would rather sit at home and do nothing while collecting unemployment. It's become an accepted narrative that the American Rescue Plan has been too generous. But as usual, it isn't as simple as that. For one thing, that convenient storyline ignores half a century of shrinking wages. Just look at that steady drop. So maybe those people decided they didn't want to return to work for the same paltry wages. And that's not the only systemic problem that the pandemic has exposed. Take the restaurant
All right, thank you,
industry,
everybody,
where
for the
front-of-house
Hasan
employees aren't
links.
just expected
We
to work
appreciate that.
for bottom-of-the-barrel wages, mainly for tips, but they also face working conditions in an industry that's historically been toxic, rife with harassment and alcoholism and drug abuse. Sounds appealing, doesn't it? We're not disputing that people are having trouble finding workers for their businesses. More Americans are vaccinated, more of the nation is opening up. And many businesses undoubtedly can't find the help they need. So what's the explanation, the real explanation? Because maybe some Americans have simply decided to follow through on the implied threat in that old capitalist adage, well, if you don't like it, you can just leave. Joining me now to discuss this and enlighten us all is Robert Reich. He's professor of economics at the University of California, Berkeley. He was also labor secretary.
So yeah, Chad, this is actually a really, really, really important point. Is for the longest time, libs have been like, and conservatives, you don't like your pay? Quit! Go find another job! Well, now people are actually quitting and finding other jobs, and what they're finding is, whoops-a-daisy, chat. Whoops-a-daisy. People are finding other jobs. People are starting to demand more. The more secure people are in their survival, the more they're demanding. Here's a tweet I did the other day. Labor produces all value. McDonald's now hiring. Free iPhone. What that means, chat, is they're desperate. They're trying everything but raising wages. And if McDonald's can pay $20 an hour now, they could have been paying $20 an hour for years. And if you use your brain for 5 seconds, how much is a combo right now? If you got a quarter pounder with cheese meal with a medium soda and a medium fry, how much is that? $8, $9, $10? If somebody makes $7.25 an hour, that means basically if they make a total of 2 combos an hour, they're already making a profit for the company. Pathetic. Meanwhile, people are slamming out combos constantly. They're making 20, 30 burgers at a time. They're producing way more than $20 an hour worth of value. Not working is communism, and if you don't work at McDonald's and you don't get an iPhone, therefore communism is when no iPhone, case closed. The McDonald's wage in Finland is almost $23 an hour, and the cost of a Big Mac is only 30 cents more. That's because labor is only, like, how much? Okay, actually, this is something that's a known thing. This is not just a question. Since labor costs account for 25 to 30% of fast food operations' total operating costs, Sanders is proposing a 20% increase to the total operating cost at McDonald's restaurants. So in other words, if a burger costs $2 to make to a McDonald's all in, if we double that value, right? So it's a 20% increase in the total cost. That means it's $2.40. By the way, the reality is it oftentimes doesn't result in price increases.
Under President Bill Clinton, more recently, he's somebody who's been in a big
This article says MCD labor cost is 17%. That McDonald's salary study gets it wrong. According to the Huffington Post, the study was a simple one. It looked at the percentage that a McDonald's as a corporation spends on salaries, about 17.1%, then calculated the price it would change if that number was doubled. Thus, if McDonald's doubled all salaries, all it would have to do is raise prices by 17.1%. This is completely wrong. Generally, franchisees pay about 20% in labor costs. Okay, this is not even true. These oh god, it's so obnoxious. This isn't even a hypothetical. This is empirical. McDonald's other CEOs tell investors $15 minimum wage won't hurt business. That was April of this year, April 5th, 2021. Big restaurant chains are telling investors that a national minimum wage hike wouldn't be that big a deal, even as their corporate lobbying groups in Washington fight plans for a $15 minimum wage. We share your view that a national discussion on wage issues for working Americans is needed, but Raise the Wage Act is the wrong bill at the wrong time for our nation's restaurants, the National Restaurant Association wrote in a letter to congressional leaders in February. The restaurant industry and our workforce will suffer from a fast-tracked wage increase and a similar elimination of the tip credit. The following day, a top executive at Denny's, one of the association's members, told investors that gradual increases in the minimum wage haven't been a problem for the company at all. In fact, California's law raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2023 has actually been good for the diner chain's business, according to Denny's chief financial officer, Robert Versotek. As they've increased their minimum wage, kind of in a tempered pace over the time frame, if you look at that time frame from us, California has outperformed the system. Over that time frame, they had 6 consecutive years of positive guest traffic, not just positive sales, but positive guest traffic, as the minimum wage was going up. In January, McDonald's CEO Chris Kempinski told investors the company developed quite a bit of experience with minimum wage hikes at the state level, and they haven't been a problem. Our view is the minimum wage is most likely going to be increasing, whether that's federally at the state level, as I referenced, and so long as it's done in a staged way and in a way that's equitable for everyone, McDonald's will do just fine through that. On most recent earning calls, executives at restaurant chains that belong to the association have explicitly debunked these talking points when answering questions about how a higher minimum wage would impact business. Our industry runs on a 3 to 5% pre-tax profit margin in a good year. During a pandemic is not the time to impose a triple-digit increase in labor costs. Far too many restaurants will respond by laying off even more workers and closing their doors for good. While the group does not currently disclose its members, 2 companies it previously listed among its national corporate members have recently disputed the idea that $15 an hour is an unaffordable labor cost. Domino's Pizza CEO Rich Allison told investors at a February earnings call, "We've been able to manage our way through a lot of minimum wage increases across the country. And I'll tell you, quite honestly, in our corporate store business, we're not paying the federal minimum wage anyway. You can't go out there and hire people at that rate anyway. We're above the minimum wage. But for our folks that work inside the stores and our tip drivers on the road, and then in our supply chain business, we're in excess of $15 an hour everywhere we operate." Company's response to investor inquiries about a $15 minimum wage is especially notable, given that its employees lean Republican. Domino's Pizza employees gave $654,000 to GOP candidates in the 2020 election cycle. Now, what does this mean, chat? See, the reason why these CEOs are telling their investors this shit is because they can't lie to their investors under federal law. They have to tell the investors the truth. Now, they're lobbyist scum. They can lie to you. They can lie to the public. They can lie to politicians. But the CEOs, when they're talking to their investors, can't lie. They have to tell the truth. Otherwise, they can get sued.
Now, with far-right Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. More on that in a moment. But he's the author of the book, The System, Who Rigged It, How We Fixed It. It's now out in paperback. Robert, so nice to have you back on the show. I want to begin
Papa
by
John's is
taking a
guilty
look
of saying
at the
the N-word.
unemployment rate. Not just this week's, but over time.
What's your way to counter the small business arguments? Just because you own a small business doesn't mean you get to employ people for sub-minimum wage. If working for you for an hour doesn't produce $15 of value, then the job that you wanted the people to do isn't worth doing. And the truth is, fears of big small business job losses have not actually borne out. So even if hypothetically such a job existed, who cares? And we know that the number of those jobs that would be lost are actually so minuscule as to not even be measurable. Because the $15 minimum wage exists in a lot of places right now. And the apocalypse of small business job losses has not happened.
Still looks like it's recovering. It's falling from its massive pandemic
we covered the ice
spike.
cream parlor story
Is there
already,
anything
Jack,
in your view to
last
support the
week.
claim that unemployment insurance payments provided by the American Rescue Plan has led to a worker shortage?
I don't see any evidence of that at all, Mady. And you're right. Republicans are saying it over and over and over again. They are the masters of the big lie. Whatever they want to say, they say it in a very disciplined and repetitive way. And that sort of seeps into the public discussion. But there's absolutely nothing to this. The fact of the matter is that, for one thing, we have a lot of women, particularly
Whimsical
women,
Pickle, I'll show you.
workers
Stout
who have
Lover,
dropped out of the
GrizzCon,
wage
thank you
labor
both for
force
subs.
because they cannot get childcare, and that's particularly been true during this pandemic when kids have been out of school. Secondly, you've got a lot of people who are still reluctant to go back into places that may be unsafe. And we know that empirically. There's a lot of evidence. And thirdly, I think it's fair to say there's no shortage. There's no wage labor shortage. I mean, there's a shortage of living wage jobs. And there certainly is evidence that some people are rethinking their work and saying, it's not worth it to me to go back in at $7.25 an hour or even at $10 an hour because these are not living wages.
This is actually a really good point. How many of you have ever worked a job where the cost of parking, of transportation, of gas, of food was like 50% of your hourly rate? How many of you have ever taken an Uber or a taxi to a job and then basically just paid for that Uber or taxi to get there to your work day? But you had to do it because you couldn't get transportation, and if you didn't show up, you would have been fired. That's the type of shit that Americans face. Literally paying to go be someone's slave. So yeah, I want free public transit. I want free childcare. I don't think that you should lose money going to work. And in the societies where they take care of childcare, and the societies where they take care of public transportation, more people go to work. This is not a difficult thing. And when you look at labor force participation rates in Scandinavian countries where look at this. This is the labor force participation rate among OECD countries. So these are the developed countries, the so-called rich countries. The country with the highest labor force participation rate is Sweden at 89.1%. These statistics from 2019. Obviously before the pandemic. 89.1% are working of people 25 to 64 years old. The United States, it's 78.2, below average. Below average. The average is 78.4. Less Americans work than almost every one of those lazy European countries. 89.1 for Sweden, 78.2. And why is that? In Sweden, aiming to support children's development, Sweden's universal system has established a new norm for young children. More than 90% of children from 18 months through age 5 now attend early learning programs. Free children's health care as free transportation for the little ones, a monthly allowance for children. Basically, there's universal child care that the government provides when the child is around a year old. In Sweden, children and education combine. Childcare and education combined in an integrated system known as EduCare. Often cited internationally as the gold standard in early learning, EduCare is a nationwide network of subsidized preschools that provide childcare and education for the children of all working parents from the age of 1. With preschools in Sweden typically operate between 6:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. daily. Fees are proportional to parental income and capped at a monthly equivalent of less than $200 Australian. Children from the age of 3 receive 525 hours a year free of charge. The system is complemented by a paid parental leave arrangement that provides 480 days for each child, ensured at 80% of parental income. The educare system is a result of a decades-long struggle, which gender equality was a driving figure. From this struggle arose a mission to design a child care system that would be accessible, affordable, provide a stimulating environment for children where women and families would feel comfortable leaving their children. As more women transitioned into the workforce, the campaign grew to include the rights of all children to quality education and care, not just the children of working women. Underpinning EduCare is the belief that all parents should be offered the same childcare opportunity regardless of a family income. Implicit also is the understanding that society reaps rewards when both parents work, including productivity gains and the retention of talent in the workplace. And that leads to more people being able to work because they're not going bankrupt from childcare costs. They're not going bankrupt and losing money from transportation.
And this idea that unemployment payments are too generous, it's kind of galling to hear multi-millionaire members of Congress and members of the Senate and House saying, well, $300 a week is just too generous. I mean, what's your response to them when they say that?
I doubt that, Obi-Wan.
You have to understand, and many people don't get it, that these $300 a week in extra unemployment benefits are not really extra unemployment benefits. Fewer than 30% of American workers who are out of jobs, fewer than 30% actually are eligible for...
Not just you, Mike. Other streamers are also effing. I think the ads are interfering with the I don't... Really? Who else is effing?
State unemployment insurance, which means that this $300 a week is all they get. Now, you try to live on $300 a week. It cannot be done in most places around this country. In fact, I venture to say it can't be done literally anywhere.
Yeah, we talked in the start of this show, the previous segment, about the war on democracy, and part of that is to do with the fact that we have this system where states can just decide what voting laws they're going to implement. The same applies in the economic realm, where states can just decide how to distribute unemployment benefits, and there is no federal floor, which, as you point out, is a real problem. Two of your recent tweets, Robert, caught my attention. One is that the rich are currently paying one-sixth of what they were in taxes in 1950.
Conservatives just want to force women to accept traditional roles and stay home without having to pass laws to require them to. My mother fell victim to media hysterics around daycare and babysitting in the 80s and 90s and changed her mind about staying in a career out of paranoia. I really think it harmed her mental well-being and quality of life long term. Wow. That is fucking sad. That is really sad.
53. And the other is that if the minimum wage had kept up with CEO pay, the minimum wage would currently be $33 an hour. $33 an hour. Why is $15 so out of reach politically in this country when it should be a no-brainer? When you can't even get all of the Senate Democratic caucus behind $15 an hour?
It should be a no-brainer, exactly.
Captain Log, I think you should try whatever you can.
Accumulating at the top. You've got Wall Street bonuses, executive pay, CEO pay, all of it rip-roaring ahead, even during the pandemic. You had, during the pandemic, America's billionaires, I mean, just the billionaires increased their wealth by 45%. So the idea that we cannot provide a minimum wage that has not been lifted in over 12 years, maybe, is absurd. I mean, the Democrats ought to be getting on this right away.
Robert, what do you say to small business owners who say that raising wages will force them out of business or force them to fire people? Mom and pop types. Should they get some sort of federal assistance to help pull this off, to get through a transition?
Well, we've been through this, and we've been through these same arguments over and over again. What happens is, and we know this historically, and these small businesses ought to get the evidence. When there is more money in the pockets of low-wage workers, they turn around and they buy things. They buy things in the local economy. They buy more meals. They buy more small things that small businesses have to offer. Small businesses do better because people are paid more. And they do even better when low-wage people are paid more, because low-wage people spend everything that they received. And this has been the history. We know this. I mean, since the minimum wage was instituted in 1938, that has been the story. Small businesses complain, but once we get an increase in the minimum wage, small businesses find that their businesses improve.
Interesting. It's an important point that we have had these debates before. As you mentioned earlier, Republicans are very disciplined at pushing the same old talking points again and again. Robert, there have been reports that some workers have simply rethought their lives and their careers during this pandemic, during the lockdowns, who describe the pandemic as an awakening and don't want to return to the way things were pre-pandemic. And this isn't just true in the restaurant industry. There is a desire for a new kind of normal across our economy. And I wonder, isn't this the kind of reordering of the economy that happens after every major crisis, every previous low point? There's some things just don't go back to the way they were.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Mehdi. We don't go exactly back to where we were before.
So, chat, what do you think about that? What do you guys think about that? About the world not going back to the way it was? Do you think that we are going to spend more time kind of in our homes and working with telecommuting? How many of you have started to go back to the office? How many of you are there anybody here who became a telecommuter during the pandemic and that's become permanent? I think we should be at home more, but I doubt that will be the case. Nope, it's even worse now. I do not think the world will go back to normal, much more telework. The old world sucked dick, the current one does too. I've been permanently homeshored for years before the pandemic. Really, Hackstock, I didn't know that. We can't go back, only forward. Most of my friends in tech are back in offices, but some are still working from home. None of these Sweden companies are geopolitical powerhouses in the size of capital. Increasing the wage means more capital for the wage earner, so more Guys, if the worker keeps more of the production, the value of the production, that's actually more capitalist. Dude, do I need to explain to you why capitalism? That's not capitalism. You're talking about the wage system. You're talking about commodification. I telecommuted in the beginning and I quit in January. My friend says the office will open in July. Why'd you quit? I've had 2 call center jobs. Not fun, but 18 an hour for at-home work. Lost the first one after 6 months. Been on this one for about 2 months. Nice. We're working on making it permanent at my job. We're looking at maybe a hybrid model in the spring semester. Yeah, what about schools? Are they, I mean, I would assume they're going back to classrooms, right? Personally, I hate online learning. Am I alone? I know this is probably an unpopular opinion here. IKEA guy was the actual richest private person, but the wealth was held in a Dutch charity. Oh, really? Interesting. Schools are reopening with mostly half capacity online. Learning fucking sucks, dude. Almost failed. Yeah. I hate online learning. There, I said it. I hate online learning. I know it's unpopular probably on Twitch, but like from a classroom perspective, I'm just so bad at learning and paying attention online. Actually physically going in school helps me learn. I loved online learning. I saved over $500 in traveling costs. Yeah, that's the main advantage, the traveling costs.
After major recessions, wars, some sort of tumult, we know that people do have an opportunity to rethink a little bit where they are, what they're doing, what they're enjoying, what life is all about. It's not just about making money, obviously. People need enough money to get by. But many people say to themselves, look, I don't need to live exactly the way I am living right now. Maybe I can do it a little bit more simpler. Maybe I can enjoy my life a little bit more. A pandemic of the sort that we just had does cause a lot of people to reconsider the most basic aspects of living. And I can see that going on all around.
Yes, very much so. I have to ask before I let you go, you got into a Twitter row with far-right GOP Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who apparently had never...
Oh no, Mehdi Hasan! They're doing Twitter fights now. Oh god, Mehdi basically has a stream. Mehdi basically has a stream now.
Never heard of you, and said you didn't spell her name right. She couldn't spell Berkeley, where you teach correctly. Were you expecting that weird personal response from her?
It's Green with an E on the end. Don't know you, but when I saw Berkeley in your bio, I got it. Just put the hammer and sickle with it. Being a communist's professor, you've never done the real hard work that builds the economy. You just teach ideas that will destroy it. How do you not know who? Oh my god! The worst part of this is our opposition. And for the most part, they're winning. What's more pathetic? Our opposition or our losing to them? There must be something really cathartic about not knowing history at all. I don't know. You're gonna have to go to the Pepela communities and ask them. She said being a communist's professor. A communist's professor with Berkeley misspelled. It's even more pathetic that the neolibs don't notice they're winning. Oh god, don't even remind. Oh god. Fuck.
No, I wasn't. But this is not anything personal. I mean, I think that, and I'm concerned about what happens in the workplace. I mean, I used to be labor secretary, and obviously when one worker harasses or intimidates or threatens another worker, that worker who is doing the harassment and intimidation has to go. And if we're talking about Congress and what Marjorie Taylor Greene has done with AOC and with Cori Bush and many other members of Congress in terms of harassing, intimidating, threatening, well, that person should not be in Congress. I mean, these are the leaders of the country. They're supposed to be setting an example for us. And on top of that, you've got her hatefulness. And as it was displayed just Friday in talking about...
How do you get into working for the DSA? Does it start with membership? What do you mean? Like get a job with them? Or do you mean just like supporting the DSA?
The analogizing what Nancy Pelosi is asking of members of Congress in terms of getting some proof that they have a flu shot with what Hitler did to the Jews. I mean, this kind of nonstop hatefulness, it seems to me, requires a response. And it's not just her district.
DSA occasionally has jobs hiring, so if you want a job with them, you apply for those jobs. But as far as like working with them, you just join DSA. You don't even have to be a member yet. You could just go to a meeting, look for your local DSA, look at when they have a general meeting, and go in and say, hey, I'm new. I just wanted to come check it out. Marjorie Taylor Greene is in the chat. Hey, Marjorie, how are you doing?
I hope they throw her out. But also there should be some minimum standards of decency and truth-telling in Congress. And if there isn't, then we ought to establish.
I'm so glad you mentioned...
I live in a very Republican area, but I want to organize a DSA because there isn't one, but I have no idea how to start. The first thing I would look for is whether there's a DSA chapter in your state. And reach out to the people in that chapter.
Workplace issue, and you being a former Labor Secretary, because I just look at this situation, and it's not just Marjorie Taylor Greene. There are many others, as you know, in Congress who are breaking the rules, trying to go through metal detectors with, pushing cops around, making all sorts of violent comments. And the problem is, there's no HR department like in most workplaces. What do you do about these people who many Democrats, especially women of color on the Democratic side, feel threatened by? You talk about expelling them. You can't expel them. It's a 2/3 vote. The Democrats simply don't have the numbers to vote Marjorie Taylor Greene out of Congress. Strip her of a committee assignment. She doesn't care. She's not interested in committee work or legislating. It really leaves you with a conundrum. What is to be done? Is there any measure? Is there any halfway house between letting them do whatever they want and expelling them, which you don't have the votes for?
Well, I think that public opprobrium really does count here. The public really does have to be heard. When you have
Public opprobrium, chat. What does that mean, chat? I can't stop thinking about the smiling cannibal giants. So, is Attack on Titan a preview of our government?
Characters like this or others who are threatening the safety of people inside the House of Representatives. 4.5 months after we had an invasion of the Capitol. I mean, it would be bad enough if this were going at any other time. But remember, 4.5 months ago, a mob stormed the Capitol, threatened the lives of literally every member of Congress. If we didn't have that as a clear memory and didn't suffer from a kind of collective amnesia, then it would seem to me that this would be a no-brainer. We don't have and should not tolerate in Congress, and the public has got to speak up about this. We should not tolerate any threats, any intimidation, any kind of threats of violence at all.
Robert Reich, I hear what you're saying. I 100% agree with you. I'm not sure the Democrats do have a plan, though, to deal with these kind of figures. It feels like we haven't really been able to learn the lessons of the Trump era. What do we do about these people who say and do outrageous things? How do we condemn them without amplifying them? And how do we treat them as more than just ridiculous clown-like figures when, as you point out, they can be very dangerous? There was an insurrection just months ago, and the Republicans want us to forget that, which we won't on this show. Robert Reich, appreciate your insights on the economy and your comments about Congress. Always welcome on the show. Thanks so much. Hi, I'm Mehdi Hasan. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more of the Mehdi Hasan Show by clicking on any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, Mehdi. Thank you, Better Hasan. And we do politics here every morning starting at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. You can watch us here on Twitch. We're the morning guy. the morning politics guy, Politics Frogs, in every single day, same time, 10 a.m., day in, day out. And we carry you through your morning and early afternoon politics needs. And if you need more, Mike from PA, we have a YouTube channel. We talked about suburbs, the My Pillow guy, Ted Cruz. We talked about DSA. Amazing. Making fun of Tim Pool. Amazing. Look at all of these amazing videos. Get in there, watch them. We have me on Twitter. You got to follow me on Twitter, chat. I'm at 20,614 subs. That means I got like 40 followers on Twitter in the last day. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. Go follow us on Twitter. And of course, join the Discord, where we have an incredible community of left-wing streamers. We have left-wing community. We talk about the stream. We talk about politics. There's gaming content. It's a really awesome, supportive place. Direct action, mutual aid. And you can just let off some steam. And also, you can help produce the show. One of the things I do is I look at the links that are put into the news content suggestions chat room on the Discord. Join the Discord, come hang out, and maybe what you want me to talk about will be part of the next show.